So a very warm welcome, and I hope to be able to share with you some of my insights and experiences into book writing and publishing and how you can get started. So a little bit about me first. I am an author, of course, but I'm also a trainer, a consultant, materials developer, qualifications designer, train the trainer, public speaker, and podcaster. And I suspect that you who are coming to this webinar might have different hats that you're wearing as well, and many authors do. So in this session, I'm hoping to run through some of the experiences I've had, but to really give you some useful tips on what you can expect when you embark on the adventure of writing a book. And it's a huge topic, right? There's so much here to be thinking about, to be covering. The particular book that I have out at the moment is 7 Skills for the Future, and I focus on developing these 7 skills. And the book is very much a kind of backdrop, if you like, for all the other things that I do, all the different workshops I run and training and consulting. So it's kind of like a backdrop. Having said that, I was very happy to open my bank account app this morning and see some royalties there, which is one of the lovely things about being with a mainstream publisher. And I'm always kind of slightly taken aback when I find royalties, because it almost feels like, oh, free money. I mean, it's not free money, obviously it's not free money, I've earned the money, but it's just kind of like, okay, because it's quite unpredictable and unexpected when it happens, but it's lovely when it does happen. So in this session today, I'm going to be covering a number of things. I don't know, just bear with me once I get this working. Okay. Let me use something else because my mouse isn't working very well. So we're going to start off talking about where you might be on your publishing journey, and this is a massive topic. So I'm going to be whizzing through stuff today because there's so many different things to cover. You've got to think about, to publish or not to publish. Do I go mainstream? Do I go with a self-publishing? Why publish a book? What are some of the reasons for doing it? What are some of the good reasons, hopefully, for doing it? And maybe what are some of the myths about publishing as well, because I think there are some myths around it. Mainstream publishing, what you need to know about that. That's where my book is, with a mainstream publisher, and there are pros and cons to that. And self-publishing, which I've also done, and what you need to know about that. And again, there's pros and cons of going down each of these routes and things to be aware of. We'll talk about marketing and promotion. In either route, there's a lot more that you need to do than you might initially be thinking. How you can make money from your book, important. And some resources and links that we will also send you in an email following up to this webinar. We'll send you some separate resources as well. So the choices in terms of publishing and what you do can be really overwhelming, and there are certainly plenty of businesses out there who will gladly take money off you if you go down the self-publishing route. And with mainstream publishing, there might be lots of hoops to spring through and proposals to write and negotiations to be had. So I'm going to try and demystify some of that in this webinar. I am a successful and internationally published author with Pearson, and I'm also self-published. So I'm going to explore how to get started, the pros and cons for each route, what to expect, and how you can make money from your book. So we're going to talk about where you might be on your writing publishing journey. Maybe you're in the middle of writing, maybe you've got a great idea and you want to write about it. Maybe you're curious about the process. You're likely to be an expert in a field and you want to share that knowledge and expertise. And I'll tell you about my journey, my own journey, and none of which I could have predicted. Okay, none of which I could have predicted or planned for. So I'll share that with you, and then we'll look at the whys. Why publish at all? What are the different reasons for doing that? The two ways that you can publish and how that works. And by the end of the webinar, I hope you'll be inspired to take the next steps, whether that's writing, just writing and getting started, whether that's exploring one or more of the options that I'm going to be discussing today, or maybe even deciding that actually publishing your book right now isn't what you want to do. And that's a really good decision if that's the right one for you. I'll also be offering an individual session for anybody who wants to go into more depth about this and more details about your specific plans and things that you might be wanting to do. If you've just joined us, please do tell us in the chat where you are and maybe some of the reasons you have for joining us today and what you're hoping to get out of the session. Just be nice to kind of see where people are. So first thing to talk about is, where are you on your journey at the moment? And you can pop that into the chat. So just take a few moments to think about where you are in this process. You can type into the chat box, or you can take notes. Either is fine. But are you currently writing? So this is actually quite a big one, because I'm often amazed when I speak to people who say they want to write a book, but they're not writing. They're not blogging, they're not writing, they're not actually putting content out there. Interestingly, at the moment I'm reading The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett, which is inspiring and at the same time kind of scary. But one of the things that he says, one of the rules, there are like 33 rules, but one of the rules is that if you are somebody who wants to, get stuff out there, whether that's writing or, your story or your expertise, your knowledge, he says that you need to be doing stuff every day, like, I don't know, writing, podcasting, videos, whatever it is, needs to be out there every day. When it comes to writing a book, I think it's really important to write every day. And even if it's just a few lines, just do some writing every single day. Maybe you've written something already, you're not sure which direction to take it in. Keep writing, it will come. Writing is a process. Maybe you've got a complete manuscript ready. Doesn't matter, but it does matter to be aware of where you are right now. So think about that and perhaps pop that into the chat, where you would say you are right now in writing your book or publishing your book. And it is a journey. So where are you? Are you at the beginning? Are you, have you got a whole bunch of different ideas that you're exploring at the moment? Are you writing? Are you not writing? What is happening for you at the moment? And you can maybe just make a few notes about that, or you can pop your thoughts into the chat. And I'm going to share with you my journey to being an author. And it might kind of prompt some things for you as well, my author journey. Here you can see some of the things that I've published. Let me just respond to this in the chat. What about reading in addition to writing? A bunch of ideas, spend a lot of time reading other books, thinking about what I like and don't like about this. I think this is a good thing to do, but I still would say get writing. So reading is great, but you need to be writing something every day. So whilst you're kind of thinking about what do I like, don't like about these things, start writing some stuff of your own. Just get a notebook and write by hand if you want. Just write a few things, but keep that writing. I am a published author with Pearson Business, as I've already told you, and my book is in its second edition. and has been translated in several languages. And I've also written a kind of textbook for Macmillan, Practical Business Communication, which was a complete flop. So I'm probably not going to talk about that so much, but I'll tell you the story about those. And I've got a self-published journal, which is on the right-hand side there, 7 Skills Journal. So my first book, which actually was the first edition of 7 Skills for the Future, was initially called The Advantage, had a different title. And it was published in 2013, which is actually 10 years ago, which is kind of scary, and can't quite believe it, but it was actually 10 years ago when that book came out. And it came about completely by chance. I was not looking to write a book. I didn't have a book burning away inside of me that I wanted to write. Wasn't something I was planning, but the opportunity came to write one. So I was in a meeting with Pearson at the time. I just started my website that I have at the moment, which was also called something differently then. And my plan at that point was to have, because I work in training and development, I wanted to have a vehicle for Pearson authors, because I knew there were a lot of business books out there that Pearson authors have, and I wanted to be able to design training materials to go with those books. And so I had this whole idea that I went to Pearson to pitch it, about materials for the books and all of that. And at that meeting, the head of publishing happened to be at this meeting with Pearson, and sort of was half listening to what I was saying, but then said, actually, we, in reference to nothing, because nobody had talked about writing books, right? He just said, oh, I think actually we really do need a book that redefines soft skills, and you'd be a great person to write that book. You know, you could get a team together and you could write that book. And I was a bit taken aback, because I thought, I don't really want to write a book, but I thought, okay, I can get a team together. I can definitely get people interested in helping, put this book together. So I got a team together. And anyway, to cut a very long story short, there were 5 people on this team. One by one, they all kind of dropped off, and I thought, okay, the only thing between me and writing a book is me, and getting a contract. And so I decided to go for it. I thought, how many opportunities can there possibly be to be able to write a book? I'm going to do this. I can do it. So I had a lot of self-belief that I could do this. So I said yes, like I do to many things, and off I went on this journey of writing a book. And I treated it like a project. I wrote every day. I wrote every morning. I would write things. There was a bit of negotiation back and forth about what this book would be about. And I just did it with an editor. And it was published and translated into 8 languages. I was given a little bit of PR, public relations support at the start, which was loads of work, but not much else. I then, weirdly and funnily in a way, I then went on to develop my own workshops and materials to go with my book. So I kind of did what I had suggested doing for other authors, ended up doing it for my own stuff. And the rest is kind of history. It's kind of all grew from there. And then with Macmillan, the one that was a flop, I was working on a life skills project with them, designing materials for them. And I decided to approach them about writing a book. I thought, hey, I could write a book about life skills. I could do this. It's a completely different experience, but again, an unexpected outcome. So my intention was to write a book on life skills, personal development. I thought, brilliant idea. I can do this. Wrote a long proposal on it. So all traditional publishers require you to write a proposal. Quite lengthy, by the way. So I had written this proposal for this book that I thought was going to be great, and get it out there. And we then had a telephone conversation where they asked me on the spot, on this call, did I have any fresh ideas about practical business communication? So I said a few things, and then they said, well, can you send us a proposal about those? We don't want this, we want those ideas. So, after all my hard work on that first proposal, but I did it anyway. And I then found out that practical business communication, that title there, in their study skills suite, had been going for years and years. and that the previous author had died suddenly. This is what actually happened. So they wanted somebody to keep this going, and they needed a fresh edition. So I wrote it. It's still in print. It sold copies, but it was not successful. So, you know, fun fact, publishing is a bit like music, drama, and art industries. Only a small percentage of the total bunch of people, you know, writing. You think about how many books there are out there. Only a very small percentage are making the big bucks. So authors are considered successful if they sell a few thousand copies a year. Most authors sell only a few hundred, regardless of if it's self-publishing or mainstream. So that's really quite, you know, that's quite an important thing to bear in mind. So, you know, this book, Practical Business Communication, kind of just, it's still there, I think, but, you know, it hasn't really sold very, very many copies at all. And there could be lots of different reasons for that. I'm telling you this because the route to being an author can vary so much. And, you know, I never expected to write a book. I knew I could write, always loved writing. And I'm tremendously grateful to be with a mainstream publisher. And I also, you know, enjoyed the process of self-publishing as well. Okay, so why publish? Why write? You know, what are some of the reasons for, you know, for doing this in the first place? And again, for you to be thinking about that, you know, why? And there are lots of reasons why you might be considering being published. So start making some notes about that. And again, you know, you can make notes for yourself on this webinar, or you can, you know, you're welcome to pop those into the chat. You know, you might be watching a recording of this, so if you are, you can make notes. So here are some possible reasons why you might be wanting to publish your book. Okay, so you're an authority on a subject. You're an expert in a niche field, and you want to share your knowledge. So, you know, maybe you've perfected the art of doing something, or you have something unique that you're offering, and is probably linked to other products and services that you are offering. But do research your competition. Whether you're publishing or self-publishing, there are tons and tons of categories or niches for books. So do have a look at what is out there. And publishers today, mainstream publishers, will ask you to look at your competition and ask you to kind of include that in your proposal. You're a writer. You want to publish because you are a writer. I mean, that's the thing. You know, you have got a book burning inside you that you want to get out. So that's a great reason for doing it. It's easier than ever to get your book in print now. And for many people, this is a dream, you know, to have their book in print. And that's why self-publishing can be a great route. It's really easy to publish now. There are no barriers to entry for being an author like there used to be. The barriers to entry for being an author used to be sky high, you know, really, really sky high. But it also means that everyone is an author. Okay, so I often find myself saying when you know, people, when talking about being an author, I often will say I am an author. Because I'm trying to distinguish that I'm with a mainstream publisher to try and exploit that a little bit more. But you know, maybe you want to publish a book because you are a writer. So bear that in mind. Everybody is an author. Now, probably one of the most important reasons for having a book, and certainly for me, this is a really big thing, is that it gives you a platform. So it gives you a platform from which to offer other services. And it gives you credibility. It's probably, you know, it's big, high currency. The boundary between being published and self-published is very blurred, so that doesn't really matter. You know, it's not that it's better to be with a traditional publisher or better to be self-published. It doesn't actually matter. If you're an author, published author, you're an author. At the moment, people still admire you, although it doesn't matter to me too much, but they still admire you if you've written a book. So being an author is an amazing title to have, but then the problem with credibility can also crop up. So it does give you credibility, But because the market doesn't distinguish between traditional publishing and self-publishing, it means that anyone can get out there and write a book. So there's a lot of rubbish out there as well. So it used to be that if you had written a book, if you were an author, you must be good, okay? Because traditional publishers accept less than 1% of the proposals that come through their door. Traditional publishers invest money in you, so you've got to be good enough for them to do that. But otherwise, anyone can get published. You can pay to be published. So important to bear that in mind. You may want an additional income stream. So a book should offer you an additional source of income. Won't necessarily be large, but lots of spin-offs from a book. So spin-offs are things, you know, keynotes, speaking, seminars, other products, other services, maybe some passive income there, you know. So there are lots of spin-offs that you can get from your book. And then finally, when you write a book, you build your knowledge and expertise. So it's really good for that as well. So when you write a book, you have got to do a ton of research, right? Ton of research, no matter what topic you're writing about. You're going to have to research new concepts and new topics related to that topic. So I became much more of an expert on the skills that I write about because of having to write about them. So, you know, that's just, you know, expands your knowledge and skills. Okay, now if you've got questions as we go along, please do feel free to pop them into the chat, because I can see them and I will respond to them. So do write down your questions as we go along, although there will be time at the end to ask questions as well. Let's talk about mainstream publishers, and these are kind of the main things that you need to know about traditional publishing. So with a mainstream publisher, there are no upfront costs, okay? You get paid, okay? You get paid in advance, and you can expect them to do, you know, the whole publishing process for you, the editing, the indexing, the proofing, the design, translations, printing, the lot. None of this will cost you a penny, and they pay you. However, they expect you to have everything lined up in terms of marketing, and they expect you to do an awful lot. You will probably sell more books, okay, because a publisher like Pearson have global distribution, okay. They can get you into the Frankfurt Book Fair, big place for getting books out there. They've got global partners, they've got links, so you don't have to do any of the legwork for this, and you just don't have to do it. However, in return, they get to keep most of the royalties, and you get a big platform. Okay, so in terms of royalties, Pearson will it's roughly about 10% that I will get. So if I sell a book, you know, if a book is sold for £10, I get £1. If you're self-publishing, you get 70%. Okay, so that's how the ratio works. It's very, very hard to get a mainstream publisher to have you, but if what you're offering fits in with their strategy and direction, and you can write a compelling proposal, it can work. Okay, it can definitely work. You have to, you know, kind of think about what are they looking for, what do they want, and it's very, very competitive. So most book proposals don't get considered. So sometimes what people will do is they just will send, you know, they'll just send an unsolicited proposal. I would say don't waste your time doing that. They don't accept them. A lot of the time they don't accept unsolicited proposals. And even if you submit a proposal, it has to fit with very specific guidelines, and it goes through a vetting process, and it can still get rejected. So Pearson, for example, educational publisher, business publisher, they only take between 10 and 20 new books a year. And I think that's kind of decreasing. And it fits into a very carefully crafted strategic plan of what books they think will sell. So if you're going for a mainstream publisher, choose your publisher wisely. Make sure they have a fit with your topic. That's really important. social credibility with a mainstream publisher. However, you know, because of the competition and because of the many routes into publishing, this is changing all the time. And, you know, I went to something a couple of years back called the Business Book Awards, which I perceived to be a kind of grand event. And actually it was full of self-publishing, and it was quite a small event. So these things are changing all the time. So, you know, the credibility bit, I don't know, that's depends on the publisher, depends what they're doing, depends how well known they are, and lots of different things. There are lots of very small publishers who are doing some fantastic things. So, you know, choose your publisher carefully. You've got less creative control. So they decide what the design is. And I remember when I was first looking at designs for the first book, and they sent me their design, and they sent me some different colors, and I remember putting out a post on it and asking people, you know, what do you think? And someone saying, oh, you know, you should go with this color, you should choose this color. But actually the color's not my choice. So there might be a bit of consultation, but the publisher decides what, you know, what the design's going to be, what the color's going to be. Whereas if you're doing it yourself, you can decide all that yourself. There's minimal marketing support. So many people think that a publisher will do it all for you, do all the marketing and promotion for you. But no, when you submit that book proposal, or a bit further down the line, they ask you to submit a marketing plan, be visible, be on all the social media channels, and have a great website. And they can critique any of that if they want to, and ask you to change it. So, you know, there's quite a lot of control there. They also have control over translations and audiobook rights. So what's good about that is that my book gets translated without any input or effort from me. So I suspect the royalties I received today were to do with some translations that have happened that I don't even know about. So in terms of that, what's not good is that Pearson have got a separate arrangement with a foreign publisher. And there's no royalties. I mean, there is these translation royalties are like fixed fees. So it's a fixed fee every time it gets translated. Audiobook, interestingly there, you know, I recorded my book, it is an audiobook, and I had to go through a lengthy process to agree that I could have the audio rights to my own book, because Pearson have no current mechanism for recording audiobooks. So then I had to pay to have my own book recorded. So I benefit from that, but Pearson have the right to have those rights transferred back anytime they want to. So there's quite a lot of control going on there. You're also under contract, you're expected to deliver to a deadline, which can be quite good. And there are certain rules and so on. It's the only way you'll get into a physical bookstore like Foyles or Waterstones or WH Smith's. When you're self-published, the only way you can get into a bookstore is if you've self-published it. I don't know what the number is exactly, but it's several books, and you know, there's criteria around that. Although self-publishing and print on demand make publishing available to anyone, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be in a bookstore. You can get printed copies, make an ebook, you can market online, sell books by hand, you know, everything except physically getting your book into a bookstore. You know, you might be able to get an independent bookstore to take your book. It may not matter to you, but for me, when I go to a bookstore, I see my book on the shelf, there's a real buzz about that. Even though I know it's only short-lived. So books are only, you know, books are only on the shelf for as long as that book buyer wants them to be on the shelf, you know. So, okay, let's talk about self-publishing, what you need to know about self-publishing. So with self-publishing, it does require quite a bit of investment and commitment from you, time and money, because you have to do everything. So you've got to write the book, but you've got to do everything else as well. You've got to invest money in an agency or a service that will do the publishing process for you. So it requires a lot of self-discipline, because you're not on a deadline. You know, you don't have the publisher, you know, after you wanting edits and different things like that. So one of the simplest things that you can do to help finish your book, get it done, is have a detailed schedule and deadline. Create that for yourself. The problem most authors face when they're self-publishing is they don't understand the entire process that goes into developing, writing, and publishing a book. But once you know the process, you can create a schedule that works for you. So that's probably quite important to do that. Does anyone actually want your book? You know, you'll never know because you're paying others to create and write your book. So this is important. You know, who's controlling quality, who's helping you with editing. So know your market, know your competition, just like you have to do with traditional publishing. So I actually have, if anybody's interested, I have a kind of 10-question document that Pearson ask of all authors, but I think it's a really good one to have when you're self-publishing because it forces you to think about these things as well. So act as if you're under contract. Treat it like a job. You know, set yourself goals for every week, set aside time to write every day, and don't make any excuses. Okay. So really, you know, think about how you're gonna, you know, what's the contract you have with yourself even about writing this book. Now, you can't edit your own book. Okay, that is really, really hard to do. So for mine, I had about 5 people doing editing, proofing, indexing, and even then there were still some small typos. Okay, so you know there are 5 separate people doing that. So this is something that you'll need to outsource and pay for if you want to get that right. Really, really important. You have a lot of creative freedom with self-publishing. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. You know, you've got full control over the title, the content, the length, the book cover design, everything, which you don't have that degree of freedom with a traditional publisher. You have the option to collaborate with designers and editors and so on. So, but the you know, the end of it, the only editorial approval you'll need is your own. And so, you know, that's your kind of past, the buck stops with you. You don't have anyone else kind of giving you that feedback, perhaps, that is good when you're with a traditional publisher on some of these things. You've got 100% ownership and you've got a larger share of the royalties. So as I was saying earlier on, self-publishing, it's about 70-30, the ratio. But obviously you're doing everything. Okay, so you're doing all that stuff that the traditional publisher would do for you. The editing, the designing, the marketing, the distribution of the book, you know, all of that as well. And there are a few people who can do all of this by themselves. So, you know, you do need that accountability. So you probably will need to invest some money somewhere along the line to help you with that process. So DIY, that, you know, doing it on your own, that's where you might need to think about getting some help with that. Assisted, so those who self-publish can choose to work with freelance editors, proofreaders, and so on, designers. But, you know, you'll probably want to do as much as you can by yourself before you bring in other people, because you've got to think about the investment that you're making as well. But as I say, you can, you know, there are companies out there who will take you from start to finish in terms of your book, but they'll charge for that. Ebook and print on demand. So, you know, in the past, self-publishing meant that you had to get a print run and pay up front for thousands of copies, and then you'd end up maybe with copies you couldn't sell. That no longer is the case. Modern publishing, there's really simple solutions to this. So my journal, my self-published journal, sits on a platform called Ingram Sparks, and it's print on demand. So when I want copies, I get them to print the copies on demand, and then, you know, we've got copies that we can distribute. Simplest solution here is to publish your book with Amazon. Amazon Direct Publishing, that's an author platform, lets you upload your book and list it for free, and then readers can then buy the book, or they can have a print version. So that's the thing, you have it on Amazon, you know, you don't need to really worry so much about whether it's in a bookstore or not. People can, people can buy your book through Amazon, and they will print them on demand for you. So it just depends on how you think you might be distributing your book and what you will be doing. The cost per unit's higher than with traditional publishers, so there is a cost attached to that. But it's still, it's still fantastic, because you're never going to run the risk of having too many copies lying around that you're trying to sell, which would have been the case in the past. Just be wary of the organizations that offer to publish you, and especially be wary of any company that offers you a free course in being published. There will probably be some hidden costs there. So one of my associates once told me how they were offered this kind of, it came couched as an offer to write a book, but it was actually £4,000 course to write your own book, and it wasn't even helping with any of the other stuff around it. So just be aware of that. There's a lot of organizations out there. I think some of them might be very good, but I think a lot of it is, it's a money-making machine, because so many people want to be published. So know the difference between self-publishing and independent publishing. So just be aware of that anyone can go down the route of self-publishing. Anyone can be a book publisher. If I wanted to, I could set myself up as a book publisher. I don't want to do that. So then you've got the independent book publishers, and they are, they operate on their own rather than as part of a big company or big conglomerate as such. And a lot of the independent publishers have their own little niche of areas that they want to publish books in. So they are quite a good route to go down. If you wanted to go down that route of an independent publisher. So an excellent independent publisher, for example, will guide you through every step of the publishing process. So just to know the difference between self-publishing and independent publisher, they're two different, they're two different things. So just different, things that you need to be thinking about. Okay. I'm just looking to see in the chat if there are any questions. No questions at the moment, that's fine. But again, if you have got questions, please do pop them into the chat and I will see them. Okay, so let's move on to marketing and promotion. How you're going to market and promote your book, whether it's self-published, independent publishing, or traditional mainstream. You are definitely the best marketing tool, and you will probably need to do most of the work, because it is about you. So don't think for a minute the publisher will do everything. They expect you to do an awful lot. So what sort of things? Lots and lots and lots of things. You need to be really visible in terms of your what you do and how you promote your book. This is why it's worth looking at a traditional publisher's book proposal template, because you'll see a lot of the things that they deem to be really important, and you'll need to kind of take those on board, no matter what no matter whether you're self-publishing or independent publishing, whatever you're doing. So it means you need to have thought about your target market, you need to have analyzed it, know how to reach them, thought about the competition. How is your book different? What is your book's unique selling point? What is your own visibility like? And your social media and your marketing plan for this book. So here's what you need to be thinking about. So be visible on social media platforms, so that people know about you, and they and be producing content there, because that's going to be a place where you can market your book. Have a great website. So I know a surprising number of people and authors who don't have a website, but the website's where you establish your brand persona. It's where you invite people to learn more about you. So make sure that you've got that somewhere where people can go and find out about your book. So an author website or an author section on your website should have stuff about you, excerpts from your book, a link to buy your book, a way to contact you. maybe a downloadable media kit, that kind of thing. Maybe you already have these things, which is great, because then you can just enhance them for your book. You might want to have a newsletter or a newsletter sign up form, and again, if you've got that already, great, you can just adapt that for your book. But you want to kind of establish a database. You're going to need people who will review your book, because again, that's really important. You've got to get those reviews out onto Amazon, whoever you're published with. You've got to get those reviews onto Amazon. So you need to be sending people advanced copies. You need to get people reviewing your book. So if you've got a mailing list, that's a good route for you to go down if you've already got email, because that's going to secure the sales of your book. And think about what that might look like, because you might need to have an email strategy for your book. Who's your audience? So how are you going to promote your book and get it out there? Think about its natural audience. Who'd want to read your book? Where they're going to go to find suggestions for new books? Where are they? Where do they hang out? And how are they going to find your book? Which communities are they in? So just coming back to book reviews for a minute, the Pearson expected me to do this actively before the book was even published. So before it was out there, I had to get a whole load of reviewers out there. And of course, what was great is they sent all those books out for me, advanced copies. So you'll still have to do this if you're self-published. You need to get as many reviews as possible. This is what heightens your book's visibility. And you probably, if you think about it and stop to think about it, you probably have got a lot of people in your network who would be willing to do that. Choose the right book cover. So a lot rests on your book cover. And people do judge books by their covers. So that's the design and all of that of your book, that people are going to want to pick it up and look at it. That's part of your promotion. So you may want to outsource that. That might be something that you definitely want to outsource. You can also do things like offer your book for free on Amazon. I can't do this with my book, but if you're self-publishing, you can do this. So you can do a free launch. You can organize different things to help get your book to put your book out there. You need probably at least 20 reviews for your book before it's out there. And many potential readers won't actually look at a book unless they can see some reviews on it first, or just to see those stars. They won't actually necessarily look at the book. So that's really important. And then coming back to Amazon, you need to be looking and get very savvy with their categories and make sure you've got the right category for your book on Amazon. So that Amazon Publishing do a whole lot of tutorials and things in that. It's quite a lot of detail to get into. But if you're self-publishing, you've got to choose that category where your book's going to go. You can also do things like use ads on Amazon to boost your sales and so on. So, different things that you can do. And you might want to think about, if your readers are on Facebook, then you might want to think about a Facebook marketing campaign. So there are lots of things there to consider, and probably too much to go into huge detail with on this webinar. But all of this, the social media, the reviews, the posts that you put out about it, all of these different things are, success on those platforms comes from very, very carefully planned content. And if you're already on these platforms, it's going to be easier to start putting content out there connected with your book. But different things you could try is like, you could, if you're doing different book covers, you could share different variants of your book cover, ask for views on that. You can post screenshots of your favorite quotes or snapshots from your book. You can do little excerpts from your book, maybe as blogs, kind of be very vocal about the fact that you're writing a book, or your book is coming out. You could have author events. These are, as Isabella will know very well, these are huge amounts of work to organize, but they can be beneficial. You can promote that on your social media. Maybe you can content barter, so connect with other writers, cross-promote each other's books, lots of different things you can do. There's lots of ideas out there around what works. And of course, these things change all the time as well, but it's a lot of work. I just want to emphasize that it's a huge amount of work. In terms of public relations and PR, I was lucky enough to have a PR agency given to me by Pearson. They put together a relentless campaign. It was constant work. Whenever they offered me opportunities to write an article or be interviewed, I had to go along and do it. Didn't matter if I felt like doing it or not, I had to go along and do it. I'm not even sure whether it translated into book sales or whether it was worth it. I don't know, but media exposure is always good, if possible. It's always good. Okay. So think about, there are book PR agencies out there that you can use. That can be quite good. Otherwise, if you're not using a PR agency, you'll need to do all this yourself. Contact radio stations, newspapers, journals, get your articles and things out there. So a lot there to think about, and it's definitely about you. One of the things I did very, very early on, and I never did it again because I thought I'm never going through this again, but I was invited to give a talk for Chartered Management Institute, one of their little local events, and it was up in, I can't remember where it was, I was thinking up in Milton Keynes, something like that, and I trekked all the way up with my box of books, and I put them all out on the table in the back, and I did my talk, and I think I sold one book. So these things are not always great, don't always result in book sales, but it is about exposure, definitely. Okay, now I'm aware of time and that I am kind of whizzing through all of these different things with you, but I do want to talk about how to make money with your books. I think that's one of the things that is important. People want to make money, but I kind of enlighten you as to what really happens here. You need to sell a lot of books to make any real money. Okay, a lot of books. So remember what I said at the beginning, publishing is like art, drama, music and art. Okay, only a very small percentage, right at the top of that pyramid, if you like, make the big bucks. Okay, you think about theatre, tons and tons and tons of performers and people who want to be performers. Tiny percentage at the top are the ones that are making huge amounts of money. So again, authors are considered successful if they're selling a few thousand copies a year, and most sell only a few hundred. So for me, Pearson make the most money from my book. But for me, the main money comes from leveraging that book as a platform. So from being associated with Pearson, from the workshops that I do, and so on. So if you're, how are you going to make money? So if you are self-published, you could be paying, before you even see any money, you could be paying somewhere in the region of £5,000 or up to that amount of money for your book to be published. And you've got to sell a lot of books to make back that investment. So do those calculations, do some hard calculations about, am I going to make that money back? So it might not be a viable income, but it is going to give you other things as well. So the royalty factor, it is great to get royalties. It's pretty cool to get royalties on your book, and you will get royalties. But if you want to make money as a result of your book, you need to have other things alongside it, okay? Because the royalties might only, cover your costs. So how can you leverage your book? You need to know your competition, and you need to know what your unique selling point is of your book. What is it about your book that's different from what is already out there? There's got to be something different about it that makes it unique. That is, that's worth spending some time on thinking about what is the unique selling point. So some recent data in terms of what people are earning, just to kind of, they might be earning, a lot of them are earning under $5,000 a year. Nearly 20% of self-published authors make no income from their writing. Traditional publishers, income range of between $5,000 to $10,000 a year. Hybrid authors, those who both self-publish and publish with established publishers, tend to make more money. And this is partly because of the algorithm. So if you've already are with a traditional publisher, and you're on Amazon with that traditional publisher and you self-publish, Amazon can't tell the difference. So my journal is right up there with my other book, even though it's self-published. So, you know, hybrid publishing, hybrid authors tend to earn well and do well. And at the high end of the spectrum, 1.8% of self-published authors made over £100,000 from their writing last year. I certainly don't make that kind of money from my book. So it's just a kind of a bit of a reality check around making money with your book. So now we're coming up to the very end of the webinar, and I was going to run a breakout session now, but I think we're quite a small group at the moment who's live on the session. So I think I'll just get you to think about your next steps and perhaps pop them into the chat. What are your next steps? You've taken the time, you've invested the time in coming along to this session today. What are your next steps going to be? And it's good if you can write them down, because it's going to help you to perhaps commit to them. So what are your next steps? Maybe your next step is simply going to be to start writing, which is a great next step to have. And one of the things about writing, so I am hopefully about to start writing another book. And one of the things that's really helpful when you're writing is to write a blog. Just write a blog, and because blogging is like a mini publishing. It's something different about that than writing a manuscript. So if you're kind of exploring ideas and you want to just kind of, it's not that people are necessarily going to comment on your blog, because you know, it doesn't always happen. But if you've got an idea and you want to explore it and flesh it out a little bit, start writing blogs, and that will help to inform what your book might end up looking like. So, you know, so that's a great action step, is to just start writing. If anyone else has any action steps they'd like to share, then do pop them into the chat. And you know, I hope I haven't overwhelmed you with all the different things that are connected with writing and publishing. But I think, you know, just thinking about, what do I want to actually, you know, do I want to pursue being with a mainstream publisher, or am I happy to pursue being with a self-publishing? And then remember that in-betweeny step, which is an independent publisher, because that sector, independent publishers, is growing now, and it's growing all the time. And it's a very interesting sector to kind of keep a lookout or keep up to date with, because you may find that there is an independent publisher which really fits with your niche. So do look for them and see, you know, who is out there, because there's some very, very interesting independent publishers about at the moment. Chelsea, I write blogs and content. Okay, yes, so that's an interesting, yeah, so if you already do write content, then maybe it's about, yes, exactly, developing your style. So I think what might be really good for you is just to devote a little bit of it. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. I mean, this is a great thing. You don't have to spend loads of time writing, but even if you just spend half an hour at your computer, maybe for you, it would actually be good to start a manuscript of some kind. You just start to kind of, you know, start writing a structure. What could the structure of my book look like? What are the topics I want to write about? You know, even if you don't, you know, or just do some free-flowing writing and develop a sense of your style. That could be really good. One of the resources that I'll try to make sure you get sent. It might not be straight after the webinar, but I'll put them together and these resources and get them sent out to you. And it's an app. It's a free app, I think, called Scrivener. I'll just pop it into here because you might be able to find it easily. But Scrivener is a great way, it's a great tool for writers because it allows you to kind of work with a structure. It's very difficult to explain it, but you can work with a structure, but you can also write little sticky notes. It's obviously digital, you know, the sticky notes, you can write little excerpts of chapters, you can jump around, which when you're writing, or when you start writing your book, you may not write. I certainly never wrote chronologically, like this is chapter 1, I'm going to finish chapter 1, then do chapter 2. I never did that. And with Scrivener, you can have all your chapters on there, and you can sort of go from one to the other. You can cross-reference, you can, you know, see where things might tie in with other ideas. So writing is not necessarily a linear approach. It's very much a kind of iterative thing, and I found Scrivener super helpful, and I will definitely be using Scrivener again when I write my next book. It's a really, really good tool. Okay, we're coming up to the end of the session, so thank you very much for being here today. I hope you've got some insights and some ideas that will be helpful for you. We will send out resources after the webinar. There is an option to book a one-to-one if you want to discuss your book ideas with me in a live one-to-one session. And we'll also send out some resources and links that might be helpful. And if you're interested, we're running an October Wellbeing Month with some sessions, live sessions there, if you want to come along to one of those. So thank you very much for coming today, and I hope you found it helpful.